Hello Fifth Hitchin Cubs and happy Easter holidays. For those of you who don't know me, or can't remember, you might just not remember, my name is Richard and I'm an assistant leader at Fifth Hitchin Scouts Group. I used to be a leader with the Beavers, but since Easter I've now moved on to Cubs permanently. So this is why I'm doing a video for you now. You're probably all aware of the impact that coronavirus has had on daily lives. So, for example, I'm speaking to you from my temporary self-isolation workstation. In other words, my son's bedroom that I've stolen to make it to turn into an office while I'm working home from work. Now, we've had a lot of Cub meetings cancelled. Can't be avoided, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean to say that because we can't meet up, that we can't continue doing Cub activities from home. So the other leaders and I have all got together and we're very busy at the moment planning as many online meetings, so this could be pre-recorded videos or remote sessions through Zoom as possible, so we can continue to help you complete your activities in order to earn your badges. We therefore encourage you to use much of your spare time to participate in the activities that we're going to be sending you starting from today over the next weeks and possibly into next term, depending on however long we're going to be stuck at home for. And if you complete these activities and you submit a little bit of evidence, that could be via email, phone call, pictures, whatever, and we can look at your evidence of the tasks that you've done, and from there we can obviously award your badges. So then that's going to help you in order to complete your awards or your challenge awards to help you go and get your overall goal, which is to get your silver award. So all of those details we're going to provide in future messages, and they're going to be message specific, so don't worry about that too much for the moment. So we missed 3 Cub meetings, if I'm correct, yeah, I think it was 3, before the end of term. So this first video is to catch up on one of the meetings that we missed. So I want you to complete these tasks over the Easter holidays, so that when we come back after Easter we can try and do as much as we can and we haven't fallen behind too much. So one of the things that we planned to do just before Easter was work on your environmental conservation badge. Now there are 4 parts to this. Number 1, you have to learn about the difference between recyclable and non-recyclable items, know which ones to put into which bin in your home. So that'll be fairly straightforward, hopefully. Number 2, learn about different ways to reduce energy and water. Number 3, find out about one type of renewable energy. And number 4 is that you have to complete 2 small projects. So let's get cracking, go into the first one. So how do you know what can be recycled and what can't be recycled? Well, there's lots of different examples, and the easiest one that people think is, oh, just look at the packaging of what it is and it's got the little recycling logo on it. But one thing to remember is that although the material itself may be recyclable, it doesn't necessarily mean that the area where you live have the facilities to be able to recycle it. So what I'm going to want you to do for one of your first tasks is to do your own little bit of research and find out in the area you live in what you can recycle and what you can't. So just an example of this. I could easily tell you the website, but I want you to do your own research because you never know, it might help go towards another batch, you know, nudge nudge, wink wink, etc. So I'm on the Hertfordshire Council website for waste, and it's got little details in here that include household waste and recycling centres. So they're essentially tips and dumps you can go and take your rubbish to. There's a picture there of a couple of guys getting rid of their gardening. Bin collections, which is obviously the bin people that come and collect your bins once a week. And they have a few other bits as well. So I'm going to let you do some research. I'm sure you'll know how to use Google and find this website, and to look at this website and find out all the different types of things that you can recycle and you can put in your bins, and ones that you can't. And also, maybe for a bit of extra credit, if you can't do it, maybe have a look on here and it might tell you some alternative ways in which you can recycle anyway. So that's number 1. I'm going to pause this video now and prepare for the rest of part 1 and the following parts. See you in a moment. And we're back. So here's an example of some of the bins, or perhaps all the bins, that you might find outside your homes. So I've got 5 different types here. This one here is a brown bin that is typically used for garden waste. purple bin for non-recyclable items, the black bin for recyclable items. Now we have a box here as well for paper, and we have a food caddy for food waste. So I'm not going to go into any more details about what goes in what, because as I said in my previous note, that's for you to do your research and find out. But one thing that I will be doing is at the end of this video, we will be submitting you guys a quiz to fill in, and some questions in that quiz will include identifying the types of waste that goes in each of these bins. And we're back. So, just finished part 1. That was quite easy. Now moving on to part 2. Learn about ways to reduce energy and water. Well, there's an obvious one that I think just about all of us know. If you're in a room and you've got the light on and it's daylight, well, you don't need light on, you can turn it off. Or if you leave a room at night, again, turn the light off behind you. So you'll see an example here. What I'm doing is not being very good because I have left the light on. So I'm just going to go and turn it off. As you see, there's virtually no difference because I'm filming this in the day, so I don't need the light on, do I? So there's just one example. I can turn it off. So I've got a couple more videos to show you here. These are just some examples of how you can try and save water and energy in your home, but they're not exhaustive, so you can also think of some other examples of saving energy for yourself that I've not mentioned, and perhaps you can mention them in your quiz at the end of this task. So stay tuned. So here is a great way of saving energy, but it's a method that very, very few people use. When you want to try and save energy, the appliances that use the most energy are the ones that you should target first, because after all, that makes sense, doesn't it? The most powerful ones. But did you know that probably the most, or one of the most powerful appliances in your home would be something that's really small and simple and you didn't think? And that is a kettle. Now the reason that is because the primary use of a kettle is to heat water up, and water absorbs so much energy, loads and loads and loads of energy in order to heat up. That is why it uses so much energy. So here's an example. A light bulb will use about 14 watts of power. So if you're not too sure what a watt is, you'll learn about it in science lessons in the future. It's basically a unit of power. A kettle, for example, I'm just going to pour the old water out here, or this kettle, if you look on here, you can get out, right? You see that it says 2520 to 3000 watts. So that is a lot of power, especially when you compare it to light bulbs. So essentially this kettle is about 200 times more powerful than your light bulb. So how do you save energy from it? Well, when people fill up a kettle to make their tea or coffee or whatever, they'll typically just put it under the tap and fill it up. But how do they know that they're putting the right amount of water in there? Well, the fact of the matter is, the vast majority of people, when they fill the kettle up, they will put too much water in their kettle, so that when you turn it on to try and boil the water in the kettle, it will be using up all this energy that will be boiling all this water that you don't actually need, because it will just get left in the kettle and it will go cold, and that will be lots of energy wasted. So here's the best way of doing it. Say I want to make 1 cup of tea. Put in enough water for 1 cup. There might be a bit of spillage here, but that's because I've only got one hand holding the camera. And 1 more cup. So depending how much water you want to use, put in how much you want plus 1 extra cup of water. So if I was making, for example, 4 cups of tea, I would put in 4 cups of water plus 1 more, that would be 5 cups of water. Then that way, when you boil the kettle and you pour all your tea out, you will only have a tiny bit of water left over. And that way, you're not wasting all the extra energy to heat up all the additional water. Hello again. So here's a really good example of a way you can save water. So as you can see, I've got a little tap outside. I'm kind of sitting on the floor of my patio in my garden right now, and the tap is connected to a hose, and that hose can be used to water plants in any area of my garden. Now, the hose is a great way to use water, but it's not a very good way in terms of saving water, because the water that we use from the hose comes direct from the fresh water that we get from the water pipes that go into our homes that we use for heating, cooking with, making our tea and coffee, running our baths, etc. So isn't it a great way if we can use a different type of water to water our plants and do our things in the garden? And this is where one of these things comes in handy. This is a water butt. Excuse children if you can hear them in the background. So my water butt is basically a giant water tank, and it collects water from the drain pipes that go across mine and my neighbour's roof. So when it rains, rather than the water just getting wasted, it falls off a roof from the gutters and down and saves up into my water butt. And if I take the lid off, you can see that there is quite a bit of water in there. I'll put that back on properly in a minute. So if I want to water my plants, rather than using the fresh water from the water supply that will cost me more money, I can just simply use water from the water butt. And that is a really good way, if you've got a garden and you want to water your plants, that's a really good way of saving money by using less water. Because you can simply buy a water butt from any sort of DIY store or home store, and they don't cost that much money. So there you go, water butt, save water. Hello again, part number 3. This is going quite quickly, isn't it? Find out about one type of renewable energy. So first off, I'll explain to you what renewable energy is. So renewable energy is something that comes from renewable sources. Now, a little bit of arguments in science about what constitutes a renewable source and what doesn't constitute a renewable source, but essentially a renewable source is something that is existing or is always existing and will always be existing over time, etc, etc. So for example, coal and gas and oil are not renewable, because in order to get them you have to take them out of the ground, and then once you've used them up, that's it, they're gone. They don't magically appear back up again. It would take millions and millions of years for oil and gas to be regenerated back in those sources. Renewable, however, as I've said, something that's always there. So for example, the sun is always there. The wind is always there. The waves in the water in the sea are always going to be there. So if you can harness energy from some of those means, then that is what's classed as renewable energy. So there are 5 what we call mainstream examples of renewable energy. I'm sure there are others as well, but there are 5 that most people consider to be the mainstream renewable energy sources. So number 1, wind power. You walk outside, the wind blows. If it's a really, really windy day, sometimes the wind can blow bits of paper, or even in very rare cases, bits of people's fences, or as you saw by the storms that we had a couple of months ago, trampolines that were flying all over the place. So the wind actually harnesses a lot of power, and that power gets used, and it gets harnessed, and it gets stored, and it can be used to create electricity in a classic example of a wind turbine. Another form of renewable energy is hydropower. So hydropower is doing essentially exactly the same thing as wind power, but it's using it with water instead of the wind. So if you imagine you're on a mountain and there's a river that's going all the way down the mountain, if you stuck a turbine inside that river, the water going down it would turn the turbine, that could then go through a motor and a generator, and then all of a sudden bang, you could get electricity. So there's an example of hydropower. So hydropower is used quite a lot in dams. So where dams have to hold back a lot of water and they steadily let water through, depending on to prevent flooding or for agricultural reasons. So quite often dams contain built-in hydro power stations in order to harness energy from it. So the next one is solar energy. So as I've just discussed and mentioned, the sun. The sun is a great big giant ball of gas. Now, although it's classed as renewable, there is some debate that technically it might not be renewable because, as I just explained earlier, gas is not renewable energy. So if the sun's made of gas and it burns, and that's what creates solar energy, how can that be renewable? But anyway, if we're looking at relative terms, the sun is going to be there for millions and millions of years. It has been there for millions and millions of years, and it's going to be there for millions and millions of years more. So in our lifetime, we can consider that a renewable energy source. So probably the best example of using the sun as an energy source is photosynthesis, to grow plants. Plants absorb the warmth from the sun in order to live and reproduce and create their fruit and their food. Also, just in terms of drying clothes, you put clothes, you've got your washing, you put your clothes out on the line on a nice sunny day, and within a couple of hours they're dry. If you put it on a cold wintry day, they'll probably still be cold and barely get dry, but on a sunny day they'll be dry within a couple of hours. Nice and simple. Next one, renewable energy number 4, geothermal energy. Now this is one that I don't know much about, so again, maybe you could teach me something on this one here. Geothermal energy works by taking heat energy from under the ground. So a good example of that is that some houses have heat pumps or heat sinks, and what they do is they pump water into the ground, and the water absorbs the heat that is in the ground. So some of you may have been learning about planet Earth. At the centre of a planet Earth is a red hot core full of basically lava and molten liquid. So the ground itself is very, very hot. Because we're on the surface of the Earth, we're probably actually on the coldest part of the Earth, except unless you go right high up into the sky, into the atmosphere where all the planes are. But we actually inhabit quite a cold part of the Earth. So if you can take some of the heat from the centre of the Earth and bring it back up, then that's another way of gaining energy. Finally, the 5th mainstream energy is bioenergy. So this is a nice one. Every time you have organic waste, so that could be leftover rotten fruit and vegetables, it could be cow poo, it could be lots of various other things. You can actually take that, and some parts of that you can actually turn it into fuel, in some cases biofuel, and you can actually use that to run certain types of motors and pumps and engines and such. So there's another example, bioenergy. So I've given you 5 examples of mainstream renewable energies, given you a little bit of an introduction about them. I want you to select one of them and learn about each one in a little bit more detail, and think of some examples of where it's used and how it's made and how it can help us in our daily life in order to try and reduce our carbon footprint. Okay, so that is part number 3. See you soon, part number 4. What? Do you think we're going to be playing Crash Bandicoot? Although it is one of the most awesome video games of all time, we're not actually here to talk about Crash Bandicoot, rather what Crash Bandicoot is doing. Now this method here gives an example of not 1 but 2 renewable energy sources and how they're used to do a very, very simple task that will also save you energy at home, and that is washing line. So when we wash our clothes and we put them to dry in the winter, generally when it's not good weather, we will probably put them inside a tumble dry if they are tumble dryable. The problem with that is that the tumble dry uses up a lot of energy to dry the clothes, but instead, and before tumble dryers were invented, we have 2 awesome renewable energy sources that are called the sun and the wind, that people for hundreds and hundreds of years have used to dry their clothes. So that works by 2 things. Number 1, the sun obviously provides warmth and energy that helps heat up the water, and that combined with the wind 2, when the wind blows the clothes, it blows the water droplets off the fabric, and in order for the water droplets to turn from water into vapour, where it goes into the air, it absorbs the energy from the clothes that it itself has got from the sun, and the result is that your clothes now become dry. Awesome. Now it's time to play Crash Bandicoot. Okay guys, thanks for watching. We're coming towards the end of our video now, but there are 2 more things you need to do in order to get your environmental conservation badge. Well, I say 2 things, it's 2 things that group into one thing. Anyway, you have to complete 2 projects. Now these projects can really be anything to do with environmental conservation. Now I know for some of you may be thinking, that's a bit hard if I'm going to be locked inside and such during the current climate, but they can be things that you can do inside as long as they have a clear link to environmental conservation. So even if you're not able to fully implement them, even if you think of an idea and you try to carry out the project, that will still help and count towards getting your badge. So, you know, some examples of things that unfortunately you won't really be able to do right now are things like, you know, going litter picking or helping to clear a ditch or a pond in a creek, because of obviously the social distancing at the moment. But something that you could do is, for example, planting a tree or a shrub. Now, even if you don't have any outside area to plant a tree or a shrub yet, you could always begin to grow the tree or the shrub or the plant on the inside using inside composting, perhaps in your bedroom, and then as it slowly grows, hopefully within a few weeks the whole lockdown will be gone, and then you can learn to plant it outside. You could also, if you've got a garden, tidy up your garden, do some weeding, perhaps start a compost heap. One of the things that's come from the council is that they've stopped taking the food waste bins, and you have to put them with normal rubbish instead. Now, instead of putting them in your rubbish bin, you could start your own composting bin. So there's an example of a project you could start there. So you could do anything really, as long as it's got something to do with helping the environment. So that's pretty much it for the environmental conservation badge. As I've said, as well as this video, there's going to be an email sent out with some activities for you to do, specifically the quiz. And as well as that, I've also just got one more thing to talk about in terms of things to think about before we go on to new term. Some of you will be swimming up shortly, September, and I think some of you may still have to do your personal challenge award. So while you're sitting at home on these lovely sunny days, not being allowed to go out, you might want to think about things that you could do for your personal challenge. So again, it could be anything really that you try and challenge in. It could be improving in a school subject or that you're not doing so well at, or making improvement in a sport, or just trying something different. So maybe have a little think about what you might like to do, and then in following meetings over the next 2 or 3 weeks, then you could have a chat with myself or Matt or Mark or any of the other leaders, and we can help plan for you your personal challenges. Okay, so that's about it. I will probably be running the first remote session on, let me just check the calendar, Wednesday the 22nd. That's when you're due to be back. So I've got plans for that week then, so we'll be sending out meeting invites which you can all come and join. But in the meantime, if you work on your environmental conservation, if you start thinking about your personal challenges, then I think we would have a good start going into next term. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I haven't been too boring, and I hope to see you again soon. Happy Easter. Bye bye.